As of now, man, it's just disconnected, and I don't know what happened. But
Or
yeah,
they
yeah,
have high availability load balancing. Shame.
what was that? Yeah, we talk about tough on crime and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're not tough on crime, you create an environment where criminals will leverage crime because it's the path of least resistance. Like I said, people are overwhelmingly large volume lazy. And so that's why the ultimate consideration for labor is always the elimination of a labor through automations. It's not because you want to get rid of labor, it's because you need to get rid of labor because it's inefficient. I'm sure you've seen that meme that's constantly circulating around LinkedIn where you have that guy where there's like four dudes moving big boxes and he's like running from box A to box B and he puts like his hands on the box and then he's like guiding the box and everything, but he's never actually doing any work. A perfect example. Um, but that's a job to him and he's getting paid to do it and he's okay with that's what he's contributing to that effort. And crime is a similar nature, which is if I don't have to do anything of significant labor every once in a blue moon, I just have to physically show up somewhere and I get paid to do that versus actually having to go out and do a hard job that's 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week to make the same or lesser amount of money. I'm going to take the path of least resistance. And that's the environments that gangs create. And the problem with that is that it's a non-sustainable model because there's no productivity. And by forcing the crime to be crushed like they've done, it's forced people back into the workforce. And by doing that and forcing them to get a real job and actually contribute, it spiked the economy. And the areas that were once downtrodden and destitute are becoming prosperous again because productivity is skyrocketing. And so that's the biggest issue is resolving that problem, which they've done. Argentina is on a similar path, which they've completely eliminated a lot of the government programs. They, for the first time in a long, long, long time, have a government surplus. And that's because of the fact that they've been able to effectively eliminate all of the effectively non performing personnel, which is the population. And so that, and they've cut a ton of government agencies simultaneously. So between the two of those things, they've effectively revived their country. Regardless of what country you're in, that issue is the same. You want to eliminate the bread and circus. You want to force people to be productive.
Right. Yeah, you got to force them to clean up their mess. You can't just let them go keep, just escape and, make another mess. Like I mess your room up, then I go to another person's room, mess it up.
Yeah. And I'm going to go in that room and sleep on their bed and sit on their couch and eat their chips and drink their drinks until there's no more made beds and no more clean clothes and no more drinks and no more snacks. And then I go into the next room and the next room and the next room and the next room and the next room. If you just let them go from room A to room B to room C to room D, you're going to get the same thing: a messed up bed, dirty clothes, all the chips gone, and bags of trash all over the place. If you stop letting them go from any more rooms to any more rooms and force them to go back to the previous rooms, in preferably the first room, room A, and that's the room that they occupy now. You send them
Right.
back to their room.
Like you have to live in your mess, and once you get
Absolutely. In your
tired
mess.
of it, you'll clean it up.
Exactly. And that's what El Salvador did. They got tired of dealing with and living in their mess, and they crushed the mess with an extreme prejudice. It's have you ever like lived with like a messy roommate or
Mm,
anything like that? Messy in-laws or messy siblings or anything like that? Like
yeah, thankfully, I haven't been, like amongst somebody that's like severely messy or anything, but
messy coworker, maybe.
no, not too much. Everybody got slight mess, but not like no
Oh,
nasty,
you lucky
filthy.
bastard. Okay, so you can't affiliate, but most other people can. And so when you're looking at it from that perspective and you've got that messy roommate and you just can't stand it anymore, like you've reached your absolute limit. Maybe for you it might be a social behavior where it's just like that one person that just keeps doing that one thing that just continues to annoy you, and then finally you just respond to it with an extreme prejudice, multiple levels well beyond what you normally would because you've just absolutely had it. Maybe you've had that in the past, but it's much like that, which is your level of response because pendulums typically swing like this. But if you just keep tightening the pendulum back and 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 back, eventually the pendulum swings. But it's going to swing relative to the energy stored. And so it's going to go, instead of doing this number here, it's going to do this number here. And it's going to go all the way back. And this is the crime and the amount of crime. And then it just swings all the way back and it's just all eliminated. They said 90% last article that I read. And that's why it's the response is extreme. And just like with everything, like what we're experiencing now in the country, where people are just absolutely, they've had it with this immigration issues and our people getting killed. They've had it with, I'm paying 8%, 9%, 10% mortgage rates, and immigrants are being given a free house.
Right.
Illegal immigrants are being given a free house. And I'm over here starving, struggling to be able to afford food for my kids, not me, but the me's. And these guys over here are being put up in 5-star hotels and given free food and thousands of dollars in cash. And people have just like, I'm absolutely just done. I mean, you've got citizens that are actively threatening to stop giving the government any more tax dollars. Like
Yeah, I've actually seen that.
Videos pop up. Like those are starting to become an extremely popular stance, which is, I'm just not giving you any more of my money because I'm struggling to live and exist. And you're taking my money and giving it away to other people who don't deserve it. And they don't deserve it. They're nobodies to this country. Not that they don't matter as people, as human beings, but they're not our citizens as far as everyone is concerned, because legally they're not. They're not our people. They're outsiders coming to our country specifically for free benefits at the detriment of everyone here.
I feel like this was planned because I know the IRS, they, a few years back, they gave them the ability to have guns and stuff like that. So, like, I guess they suspected.
The IRS has nothing to do with it. They just collect the tax bills. And you have to remember, immigrants don't pay bills because they don't have money, because they don't have taxes, because they don't have incomes. They don't have incomes because even if they had I-10s, they can't legally work.
Right. They're talking about legally giving them jobs, like moving them into supermax prisons and letting them do those jobs.
Oh, yeah. You mean El Salvador? Yeah, of course. They're forcing them to become relevant. And they're feeding them beans and rice, which I totally agree with. Prison should be hell. Like, bring back the old school ye old prisons where it's like you're busting rocks on the chain gang, like literally just nonsense work for no reason until your sentence is over 15 years from now. You're eating bread and beans and water.
I kind of feel like that's why like the secession will occur, because, like you can't just have people like tearing their states up and then just uproot it and come in and, move into the more prosperous states. Like
I said, they'll run out of places to run. Think about it from this perspective. Huntsville, it hasn't even started seeing mass ingression yet. It's just seeing some ingression. Cost of properties went from $100,000 and $200,000 to $600,000 and $800,000 in a matter of 3 years.
Yeah.
With modest to moderate ingression. Now you start talking about like the Texases and the Floridas, the Orlandos and the San Antonios, the Houstons of the country, the super hot spots. I mean, you're talking about 4x, 5x, 6x increases in costs. You're going to start seeing greater than California prices in the very near future. In a lot of places you already are, or greater. And so when you take that into consideration and you're looking at what's happening, they're leaving those areas because the prices are crippling. And what happens when they don't have anywhere else to go?
Right.
That's kind of the whole point, again, which is reiterated of once you force them to stay, you force them to solve the problems. That's why I said the fastest way to fix the issues is for the southern states to pass an entrance tax for anybody coming from California or any of the states like California. Because then what ends up happening is you have to pay a 30-40% exit tax to leave California. You have to pay a 30-40% entrance tax to come into the new state. That's 60 to 80% of your entire net asset worth. You can't afford that as a move. The combination of the two, it's crippling. in terms of finances, unless you're moving to an opportunity where you're coming directly in to immediately inject value into the area, which it won't be to buy a house because you won't have the resources to do so. You'll just be renting and you'll be wiping out any value that you had. And you most likely didn't have a house in the first place, which means you weren't established. And that's what you want. You want the people of high value potential with low assets to come into the area and develop it. But you really want those people locally already. And then for the people who have the resources, you want to make it to where it is so counterintuitive and productive and expensive for them to come into the new area that they want to maintain that wealth and those resources and those assets, that they stay in the area they're in. You force them to stay by leveraging math and strategic approach. And then by doing that, it forces those people with the resources that now have not left and therefore have paid neither an exit tax nor an entrance tax. They will deploy those resources instead locally to fix the issue. And if you get enough people locally deploying resources towards resolving a problem in aggregate, you will solve the problem. Like I said, the numbers have already been crunched. It takes $1 billion to build a nuke, an actual functional nuclear weapon. They don't need $1 billion and they don't need a nuke. And so if you can do a fraction of that, you could probably solve most of your problems. And so I openly expect that's what they're going to do because that's the only option that they can do.
Right. Man, I think that's a good one to end this one on. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good wrap-up point, especially since this is Marty Crash. Stability. What's that?
Yeah, man. I appreciate you for coming through, man. We'll have to do this again soon.
Always, man. Always.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch